Catherine, could I get an indication if we have all the councillors present, please?
Yes, Mayor, it appears all councillors are present except for Councillor Skander.
Okay, thanks for that. I think we might just assume that Councillor Skander is running late. So councillors, I'm going to open the meeting. Good evening, councillors. I declare the meeting open at 6:31, I believe. And I'd like to say that I'm Rochelle Porteous and I'm the Mayor of the Inner West Council. I'll start by doing an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Gadigal and the Wongal people of the Eora Nation, on whose land we're meeting today. And I'd like to acknowledge their elders past and present, and their leaders past, present and emerging, and to say that this land is, was and always will be Aboriginal land. Councillors, are there any apologies for this evening? No? Okay. Councillors, as we have some members of the public that will be presenting in the public forum, I will give this notice of a live streaming of a council meeting. In the spirit of open, accessible and transparent government, the council meetings of Inner West Council will be streamed live on council's website and on YouTube. By speaking at a council meeting, members of the public agree to be recorded and must ensure their speech to the council is respectful and uses appropriate language. A person who uses defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be exposed to liability for which the council takes no responsibility. Any part of the council that is held in closed session will not be streamed and will be recorded for the purposes of verifying the accuracy of the minutes. Councillors, are there any councillors who need to disclose an interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary?
Me, Councillor Mayor Porteous.
Yes, Councillor Rossetti.
Item 5, declaring interest significant.
Sorry, could you speak again, Councillor Rossetti?
Sorry, I'll be exiting the chamber for item 5, which was last week's item 15.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Rossetti. Are there any other councillors that need to declare an interest? Okay, thank you for that. Councillors, we're now going to move to Councillor Stamoulis, yes. Please go ahead, Councillor Stamoulis. Councillor Stamoulis, I can't hear you.
Madam Mayor, just disclose. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me?
We couldn't hear you then, if you could just repeat that, please. So we can't hear you at the moment, Councillor Stamoulis.
I should disclose that I'm on the executive of the Friends of Callan Park.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Stamoulis. So that's the Mayoral Minute this evening. Thank you. Okay, councillors, we're now going to move into a moment of quiet contemplation. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stamoulis, just for the minutes, can we just clarify, will you be staying and speaking to item 13, which is the Mayoral Minute on Callan Park?
Yes, I will be, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stamoulis. Councillors, we don't have minutes to confirm at this meeting, So we'll move to the next item, which is the public forum. We have 3 speakers tonight for the public forum. They are speaking to the Mayoral Minute. So I'm going to invite the first speaker, who is Hall Greenland, to address us now. Hall?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Thank you, councillors. My name is Hall Greenland. As the Mayor has just said, I'm president of Friends of Callan Park. I spoke here some months ago in support of a council resolution demanding a Callan Park trust with accountable local representatives on its board. Such a trust, as you know, would manage the whole of Callan Park and will give the community a real say over what happens at Callan Park. State government has now indicated in the draft Greater Sydney Parklands Bill its determination not only to reject this proposal, but to go backwards in terms of the democratic protections that the Callan Park Special Provisions Act gives to Callan Park. Behind a smokescreen of false claims, it is seeking to gut the democratic and community protections that Callan Park now enjoys under the Callan Park Act. The Minister of Planning, as you may have read, claims that coffee carts, cafes, marquees and festivals are not permitted under the Act. That is dead wrong. There are 2 cafes in the master plan of 2011 adopted by the old Leichhardt Council. In the case of festivals, Laneways Music Festival, catering for some 12,500 punters, has held over a number of years at Callan Park. As for marquees, temporary structures are explicitly permitted under the Act. And as for coffee carts, when the Minister's own department held a function to celebrate the renovation of the summer house on Callan Point earlier this year, his department provided a hired coffee cart from a social enterprise. So much for this misleading spin. The 2 vital protections that the Greater Sydney Parklands Bill seeks to abolish are these. The first is a parliamentary one. Contrary again to what the Minister says, leases longer than 10 years are possible at Callan Park under the Act, but such leases must lay on the table of both houses of state parliament, and either house can disallow them by a majority vote. This is a very good protection against dodgy deals. The bill would abolish such protection. The second protection the bill explicitly takes aim at is council's power at Callan Park. Under the Act, all DAs at Callan Park must be determined by the local council. This is a further level of protection. Residents get a say and DAs are decided at arm's length from the Minister. The bill seeks to abolish this protection too. So there would be no checks and balances on the Minister's powers if this bill was to become law. As well as undermining vital protections and diminishing the power of Parliament and Council vis-à-vis the Minister, the bill also seeks to undermine social welfare and mental health uses at Callan Park. It explicitly seeks commercial tenants for Kirkbride, convalescent cottages and Broughton Hall. These are not the odd cottage or small building. Kirkbride alone is 25,000 square metres of floor space. It covers almost 5 hectares. I bring up Kirkbride because the state government ran an EOI process last year and a consortium of social welfare NGOs.
Paul, do you need some more time?
I need 30 seconds.
I'll move a minute.
I'll move. Councillor Stamos is moving an extension of a minute. Yeah, I'll second that. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Okay, please continue, Hall.
Sorry. I bring up Kirkbride because which the state government now seeks to commercialise, because the state government ran an EOI process last year and a consortium of social welfare NGOs won that process and have been waiting for 9 months to sign the lease. Now that looks very unlikely. Big bucks. So on the score of protections, democracy and the social value of Callan Park, this new bill should be rejected. And this is what the Mayoral Minute does. So I commend it to you from the Friends of Callan Park and myself personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Hall. I'll invite our second speaker who's here this evening, Cynthia Naday. Would you like to join us?
Thank you. I'm Cynthia Naday. I'm Secretary of the Friends of Callan Park, and I just want to reinforce what Hall said and also add to it. And perhaps to give it a bit of an understanding in terms of, this is called the Greater Sydney Parklands Exposure Bill. So this not only has to do with Callan Park, but it has to do with the Greater Western Sydney Parklands, Fernhill and Mulgoa Valley, which became a part of the Sydney, Greater Worcester City Parklands, unbeknownst to them in middle of December last year. The Centennial and Moore Park Trust, which unbeknownst to us, Callan Park became a part of in December of last year, and the Parramatta Park. So it's about these 5 iconic parklands. And basically the trust bill establishes a board of 8 people who will make decisions for each of these parklands. As Hall said, it gets rid of the consent authority of council, which is very concerning for us as locals, because we feel that the council plays a vital role in soliciting the input of the local community. For example, in the waterfront oval, where we currently have a DA, they're trying to build a mound which is made up of 6,000 cubic meters, which is ridiculous. And hopefully through council's process, as well as the Heritage Council, we'll be able to defeat that. It's the bill must not be amended. It must be defeated wholesale because it is so wrong for these 5 iconic parklands. The DPI board also has the ability to rezone the land. They also have the ability to undertake or facilitate business activities and facilities with the GSPT estate. So it's to commercialize these properties. They also have the ability to acquire and own supplementary land, and they can enter into an arrangement with Property New South Wales, which is particularly concerning. But what we think that's particularly about is the fact that the land underneath Callan Park is required to build the Metro West Tunnel. And so they somehow need to be able to get their hands on that land. And apparently the Callan Park Act is so tight that they need to amend the Callan Park Act in order to get it. To Hall's point, currently the Act, which is very broad, if you look at it from a perspective, it currently allows for health, education, and community uses. The new exposure bill is adding arts and cultural facilities, which we think is under community. It's also adding food and drink premises, which is ridiculous because it already is allowed, as Hall said, as a not-for-profit, and it allows for temporary structures. Well, temporary structures are already under the Callan Park Act, so it's all redundant. The Act also allows for a community consultation committee, where we already have the ability to set up a community consultation committee, and the Act prohibits or suggests that no community consultation committee will be established until after 2 years after the bill has been passed. So in those 2 years, the state government, this board of 8 people and the minister can do whatever they damn well please without any community input. I won't mention the DA consent authority and the 50-year leases and of course the commercialization. And I think what's really concerning is that the chatter on Facebook, for instance, is that people think that by allowing for commercialization, you'll fix the problems at Callan Park. The fact is that it allows for all the restaurants and cafes that are people looking for. You just have to have it has to be by a not-for-profit or social enterprise, which sets the right tone for the site and which provides good resources back into the community, which is what the site is all about. It should be established as a site of health and well-being and supported by not-for-profits and social enterprises. We have brought a number of different organizations to health in the past, and they haven't even entertained having them on the site. So it's a furphy to suggest that that hasn't been people interested in coming to the site. So I suggest to you that you strongly support the Mayoral Minute. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for that. Now, the third speaker is Anne-Therese King. Anne-Therese, are you here? I understand you are not here, but just check. Anne-Therese? No. Okay. So, councillors, we'll move on to condolence motions, which I understand there are no condolence motions this evening. And then we'll move on to the Mayoral Minute, which is my Mayoral Minute. So, councillors, you should have the Mayoral Minute in front of you. Obviously, as has been outlined by both Hall Greenland and Cynthia Naday, this is in response to the draft exposure bill, which was released on Friday. It's called the Greater Sydney's Parkland Trust Bill, and obviously of particular concern to us is that within that is Callan Park. And really what it is proposing is what I can only call a smashing of the Callan Park Special Provisions Act 2002, which has protected successfully Callan Park for the last 20 years. I think something that has always united Leichhardt Council and has also united the Inner West Council is that we all care deeply about Callan Park, and we've all stood up for Callan Park. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank the advocacy of my fellow ward councillors, Councillor Byrne and Councillor Stamalos, who've been solid supporters of Callan Park and have done some great advocacy on it, and also to the other councillors as well who have been out there on social media fighting the good fight for Callan Park. It's not the easiest issue, I think, to understand, and I think perhaps in some respects has been misunderstood in terms of what is actually being proposed. It's a bit a wolf in sheep's clothing, if you like, what's being proposed with this bill. It was interesting this afternoon, I was speaking to a senior policy officer in the minister's office, and they're quite convinced that it's benign until you actually start digging down. It could seem that way, but when you're talking about 50-year leases, which can go to private enterprises, commercial enterprises, you're effectively privatising large parts of the site. When you're talking about changing the Act, so you're no longer relying on the LEP from Leichhardt in 2002, and you're no longer relying on the heritage controls that we had in 2002, which, let's be honest, are a lot stronger than the heritage controls we have today. So I want them retained, please. When you're talking about the fact that other uses are going to be proposed to be allowed on the site, and that council will no longer be the consent authority, these are extremely concerning, and they really are important that we focus on them now and we ensure that they don't go ahead. So I also spoke, the minister was hoping to come this evening. Unfortunately for the minister, obviously there was a spill in the Liberal Party, as I'm sure you've all heard, and there was an election today for a new premier, so he was otherwise engaged. But I have an assurance that he will do his best to join us at some time during the next month so that we can speak directly with the minister, which will either be in a public forum or in a smaller gathering, but we will have an assurance that that is going to happen, which I'm really pleased about. I've also put the minister to the minister's policy advisor today that we would like an extension of time of another 2 weeks on the consultation period because it's quite short. And again, I've had an assurance that that will be seriously considered. So moving to my motion, which apologies is quite a long one, but I think it's important that we get everything in. And councillors, apologies, I'm run out of time as I can see there. Could I request an extension of 2 minutes, please?
Moved, Councillor Hesse.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Seconded.
All those in favour, please raise your hand. Sorry.
Hand raised.
Okay, I think that's unanimous. Yes, thank you. So basically what I think is really important that we say as a council, and I really hope this will be unanimous, that we oppose any changes to the Callan Park Act. As I said, it's absolutely critical that we protect this act. It has protected the park, we need to protect it. That we oppose commercial uses at Callan Park, we oppose the 50-year leases, that we call for the retention of council as the consent authority, because what is proposed in the bill is that the minister becomes the consent authority, which will remove a lot of the oversight of the local community. That we call once again for the establishment of the Callan Park and Broughton Hall Trust. That we write to the minister and outline our opposition to the exposure bill. And we call on the minister also to make public the successful tender of the EOI process. I did speak about that today, and there is a successful tenderer ready to go sitting on the Minister for Health's desk. And I have been assured that we will have that outcome very, very imminently. So I would hope that we are going to hear. And as there is only one tenderer, we probably know who that is. The next point that we make a submission, obviously, on this bill, that we also convene a public meeting, and this would be a virtual meeting at this stage, and that we would be inviting staff presentations, but also the ward councillors and also Friends of Callan Park. And possibly we may, and I am talking to the department about having a representative as well from the department speaking at that. That we promote that through all of our communication channels, including a letter to residents. And we erect 2 banners in Rozelle and Balmain with 100 call flutes that we print off saying, "Not for sale, hands off Callan Park," and encouraging people to make a submission. And that this be costed out of the council's communication budget at the cost of approximately $6,000. So councillors, that is the mayoral minute that I'm putting forward. And I'll open this up now to councillors who would like to speak on this, possibly going first to the ward councillors if they would like to speak.
No, I'd like to speak. Why possibly go to the ward councillors?
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Pastis then.
I will not be supporting this because I don't know enough about it. And putting out call flutes and letterbox drops to me is political. And to call for the retention of council as a consent authority, that's the council that cut down 11 trees without telling anybody. And no councillor followed up on that, what happened. And there was supposed the investigation, and the investigation was a joke. And the outcome. The Friends of Callan Park, who I believe are sincere in their opposition, I would go as far as saying that they should be the consent authority, not the council. And I'm totally opposed to council using ratepayers' money for the upcoming council elections. Let's just wait and see. If the minister has said that he'll meet with us, let us get more information on this, and let's go in this in a sensible manner, not a political manner, and not a council campaign manner.
Thanks, Councillor Passis.
Mayor, I'd like to speak. This is Councillor Steer.
Please go ahead, Councillor Steer.
Yes. Now, this isn't my ward, but that doesn't matter because it's in our LGA. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is that our green spaces, our open spaces, our public spaces are precious and enjoyed by everyone. At the moment, people are out there picnicking and enjoying the parks, and that has put pressure on them in many ways. Callan Park is a massive open space that the Friends of Callan Park and the people of Balmain have valiantly protected for many, many, many years. The new legislation is indeed of concern because it does alienate large parts of Callan Park for private use. We fought valiantly in another matter against a 21-year lease, or some of us did anyway. These are 50-year leases. That is the lifetime of most people and more than the lifetime of any council or state government that's around. So so it keeps them out of the control of the public. We need to ensure that Callan Park remains in public hands for public use. And the fact that this new authority or proposed new authority rolls into it for other iconic public spaces all over Sydney shows that it is part of a policy of privatisation of public spaces, and this will stop people from enjoying the space as they currently do. We know from our recreation survey that people enjoy picnicking in the park and walking around as their 2 most favourite activities, and to do those things they need space. They need space and they need places to do it. Callan Park is already very well used at the moment in the pandemic. Every time you drive past it, the car park's full, the roads are full because everybody's visiting it. And this will only continue. Our population has increased over the last 5 years by 7%, and that is in various parts of the LGA, and our LGA still continues to grow. We need our public spaces and we need to keep them public. So I thank you very much, Mayor, for bringing this mayoral minute. It is a matter of urgency and I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Is there any other councillor that would like to speak on this?
Mayor,
Councillor Stamalos, yes.
thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a very comprehensive and well-developed mayoral minute, and I'll be fully supporting this. Thank you for bringing it forward. In terms of the issues at hand, I see two strong warning signals. When a government wants to come through and change an existing act, that is a very strong signal to me. And again, when they want to change the management structure for parks in New South Wales, again, that signals to us that we need to sit back across Sydney and think about what is happening to our parks and why. Now, the Callan Park Act itself presented huge options. Within the Act, there were huge options: recreation, community, health, amenity. It presented a huge range of options, but it appears the Act now needs to be changed to facilitate two additional words going in: commercialisation and privatisation. Now, that should alarm us all in our community, because the range of options available under the Act was very, very broad. We did not need to change the Act. And again, the management of our parks in Sydney. This is a new structure for us. The GSP now managing 6 parks and having overarching control and veto over 6 of the major parks of Sydney, I believe is a relatively unknown concept. I certainly have not heard of it. It may occur elsewhere, but I have not heard of it. And we really don't know how it works. It has not been explained to us how well it works, but it does have veto over some of the over the parks in Sydney that have massive heritage, beautiful landscapes. They are accessed by the public, and it worries us, it troubles us as to what a new governance model might do. And of course, furthermore, that Inner West Council has been largely left out of these discussions concerns me greatly. And I think now is the opportunity through a mayoral minute like this to now get on the front foot and take some action. I see this mayoral minute doing that. So thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Stamalos. Are there any other councillors that would like to speak on this mayoral minute?
Yes, Mayor.
Councillor Byrne?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for tabling the resolution. I've got a few amendments that I have provided to the minute taker that I'd like to propose. And I'll just ask that they be brought up on the screen now and then dealt with sequentially. Point 2, I'm seeking to amend to read that Council requests that the Planning Minister urgently attend a briefing with Inner West councillors to explain the purposes and details of the Greater Sydney Parklands Trust Bill. I believe point 2 of the mayoral minute is that Council oppose any changes to the Callan Park Act. But I don't think that the Callan Park Act in and of itself is a biblical document. I'm not opposed in principle to it ever being amended. I'm opposed to the exposure draft that has been released last Friday, although I can't claim to be completely familiar with it all because we haven't been briefed on it properly as yet. I do think that Minister Stokes is a person of integrity and someone who can be, who's certainly an expert in his field and who's demonstrated good intentions in regards to Callan Park through the funding that he's provided. I'm not familiar with all of the, I'd like to be a lot more familiar with what his intentions are with this bill. The state member for Balmain was in attendance with Minister Stokes when the Greater Sydney Parklands Agency was announced, so he may be more familiar. I think it would be good to engage directly with the minister to have him explain to all councillors what the reason is for proposing these changes in Callan Park, what protections he believes are in place, and then we can of course then interrogate that with our own independent advice. So rather than opposing all changes forever to the Callan Park Act, I'd like to propose at this time that we request an urgent briefing with the Minister for him to come and speak to all councillors about what he's proposing and what he's seeking to achieve. So I'll move that amendment, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I actually had already provided to the minute taker something very similar to your point 2. So I've already provided that to request a 2-week extension to the exhibition period and invites the Minister to address Council at a meeting to be convened by Council. I've actually worded it that way because there's a possibility we might be able to get the Minister along to a public meeting, which I think would be preferable for the community. And alternative would be that they address the councillors in a briefing. So I'd like to leave that option open so that we could, if we can get him along to a public meeting, I'd like to be able to do that. I think that addresses your issue, point 2, Councillor Byrne. Would that be right?
I don't agree. I don't agree in principle that we should reject any potential change to the Callan Park Act. I do think we need all councillors to be engaged with the Minister. That's the most likely thing to lead to a positive outcome. I accept that if you're speaking against that amendment, that's fair enough. But
No, I'm talking about the briefing. The first point there, attend a briefing.
Yeah, I'm moving an amendment to replace point 2 with the wording that I've provided to the minute taker.
I'll replace point 2. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I wouldn't replace point 2 with that. No. And the point that you're making about a briefing is already captured, and it's already been, as good as offered, that the Minister is willing to come and talk to us. Our consistent position has been to oppose any changes to the Callan Park.
Sorry, Chair. Are you speaking to the amendment?
I'm speaking to your amendment, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So I won't accept that point 2. I'll accept point 3 with an amendment that.
Sorry, Chair. We're debating the first amendment. We'll need to debate them sequentially according to the Code of Meeting Practice. So that would need to be discussed and voted on before moving on to the further amendments.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Byrne.
May I speak on that amendment that Councillor Byrne's put up?
Yes, you can, Councillor Passis.
I will support what Councillor Byrne's put up. You're talking about leaflet drops and hands off Callan Park when let's wait to speak to the Minister. Let's get him out here and talk to him and see what he tells us. That's the way I think that we should go. It's better to try to work with the government on this. We can tell them at the time that we're opposed to what we believe their plan is, and we will come out fighting. But let's talk first. As I said, apart from the former Leichhardt councillors, and I don't think too many councillors are aware and know fully what's going on and how that Callan Park has been conducted and what has gone on there.
Thanks for that, Councillor Passis. Is there any other councillor that wants to speak in relation to Councillor Byrne's first amendment? I can't see any hands up on that.
Just briefly.
Councillor yes, Councillor De Cruz.
Yeah, look, I think we need to start off with a strong position, as in your point 2, and not water that down. So our starting position should be that we oppose it, as stated in your mayoral minute. So I don't support the amendment as put forward by Councillor Byrne for point 2.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor De Cruz. Are there any other councillors that want to speak to this amendment before I speak to it? Councillor Macri, yeah.
Yeah, Chair. As stated, I'm probably, other than walking through Callan Park doing the bay run, I'm not really that familiar with the challenges or the issues down there. I would feel a lot more comfortable actually having that meeting with the Minister first to understand exactly what his explanation of commercial activity is and being able to actually interrogate that. before I took a really firm, hard position, and I'm not saying I won't. I just feel more comfortable getting that information as being challenged by not being basically a local there and understanding the full history of what's transpired and what's happened. I just have a preference to talk first before we go to war. I think that's a good way to go, because I think if we go press the button for war, I think any chance of actually getting any outcomes might be jeopardised. So I just say, just hold your finger on the button before we press it. That's all.
Thanks for that, Councillor Macri. Is there any other councillor who would like to speak on this?
Councillor Hesse, if I can.
Yeah, please go ahead, Councillor Hesse.
Yeah, look, I understand very clearly what Councillor Macri and others are saying about the amendment. But I think ultimately, if you go into a meeting with a position where you're prepared to give ground, I don't think that's a good tactic. I think it's best to say, well, we're not prepared to give ground here, but we'll listen to you. And at that point, you might make further offers. I think pretty clearly the government has at this point not listened to council on this matter. And I don't think it's listened to the community either. So I think we should go on with the strongest position, which I think is the one that was articulated in the first place by Councillor Porteous. So I would ask that councillors consider going with the strongest hand, not the weakest one. I don't think, unfortunately, in this matter, and notwithstanding anything one might say about Mr. Stokes, that this is, I don't believe, and this is not a securing comment, I don't believe this is a government we can trust on these matters. They have a rather regrettable history of privatisation of public assets, and I'm very concerned this will take us down that road further.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hesse. I might say a few words. Look, Leichhardt Council and up until now, Inner West Council has had a consistent position of supporting the Callan Park Act and opposing any changes to the Callan Park Act for the simple reason that the Callan Park Act has served the community well, it's served the park well, to protect it in an environment where we are continually at risk of the privatisation. We've probably never seen a risk so great as the risk that we're currently facing, which is, effectively in a privatisation of large tracts of the park. Don't be fooled by coffee carts and the benign sort of proposals that the minister puts forward. This is really a gutting of the Callan Park Act, which is being proposed. And I guess if the council itself can't stand up for the Callan Park Act, it really saddens me that we have this amalgamated council, and I know it's difficult for councillors from other parts of the municipality, and I know you haven't had that long history that certainly I have had and Councillor Stamos has had, and to a lesser extent maybe Councillor Byrne, but has still been a good solid supporter of supporting and fighting for Callan Park. And we need to do that with the integrity and the Callan Park Act as it stands currently. You'll notice I've also called on the Leader of the Opposition that the Labor Party publicly announced they're opposing the exposures bill. I know that there was some doubt in the Labor Party at a state level about that, and I understand that that can be difficult for my colleagues, but I do think at a local level that we do have to stand up for Callan Park. We would effectively not be doing that if we removed point 2. That's a very strong stance that you're taking to remove point 2, and it really is throwing in the towel as far as Callan Park is concerned, which I hope that is not what councillors want to do or that councillors intend to do, but effectively...
Point of order, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Point of order. For councillors that want more information before they make a decision, to say that they're throwing in the towel is uncalled for. Councillors need to be fully informed.
That's not a point of order, Councillor Passis. You've had many years to understand Callan Park, and you've had all of the information about Callan Park provided to you.
No, I'm afraid to say I have to correct you. How have I had many?
Councillor Passis, sorry, you don't have a point of order. But thank you. If you could leave.
Please don't
me
make
to-
comments. Please
Thank you,
don't make
Councillor
comments,
Passes.
Chair, that you're not that you're not aware
Councillor
of.
Passes, please stop interrupting me. As I said, this is something which is actually critically important, and I'm very sorry that it's being interpreted in the way that it is. Clearly, I have proposed that we do seek to have a meeting with the minister. That is the final point in my current mayoral minute. I would prefer that could be also with the community if possible. I think that's all part of the process. But you have to start from a position of strength, not a position of weakness. When we've had 20 years of opposing the Callan Park Act, you don't throw in the towel. You don't say, oh, well, you're proposing that we change it. That sounds like a good idea. Let's change it. You stand strong and you continue to oppose it. And then you listen, you have dialogue, you inform. If at the end of the day you change your mind, you change your mind, but you have to hold strong on what is important to the community. If you want to hear experts, listen to the Friends of Callan Park. There could be no experts.
Yeah, your time has expired.
Thank you for that, Councillor Byrne. So councillors, are there any other councillors that want to speak to the amendment? Otherwise, Councillor McKenna? No? Okay. So councillors, I'm going to put the amendment.
Sorry, Chair, I'll make a right of reply, please.
Yeah, actually, I need a seconder for the Byrne amendment as well. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McKenna is seconding that. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Byrne.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think it's important to note that the state member for Balmain, Jamie Parker, attended the announcement of the Greater Sydney Parklands Agency at Callan Park. So if anyone's given an imprimatur to this whole exercise, it's not any councillor. And I think it's a bit much to be accused of throwing in the towel when one of your Greens colleagues was the person who attended the announcement. Fair dinkum. I was on ABC Radio last Friday condemning the exposure bill in very clear terms. I support your resolution there that you have tabled, which opposes outright the exposure bill. What I don't support or don't agree is a good position to take at this time is opposing any amendment to the Callan Park Act ever. We've got the government saying that they believe there are problems with the Act that limit public access to the site and public use of the site. I think asking the Planning Minister to come urgently and speak with us about it before adopting a hard and fast position opposing any amendment ever is a perfectly reasonable position, perfectly legitimate position. And I do agree with Councillor Passes. You and I, Chair, know a lot about Callan Park. Councillor Stamoulis does too. For everybody else, it's not as significant an issue. They're certainly not going to be familiar with all of the legislative implications of the Callan Park Act. And so getting the Minister to come and address our council as a body to explain himself prior to adopting a position on any possible future legislative changes seems like a very good idea to me. To be a little bit cheeky about it, I don't think we could be taking lectures from the Greens Party about how to do good negotiation. Intransigence is not in and of itself always successful. And so I think the amendment should be supported.
Thank you for that, Councillor Byrne. I'll now put Councillor Byrne's amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Councillor Passes, Councillor Rossetti, Councillor Byrne, Councillor York, Councillor Drury, Councillor McKenna. I think that's everybody. And those against, please. Councillor Porteous, Councillor Steer, Councillor Cruz, Councillor Stamoulis, Councillor Kiat, Councillor Lockie, Councillor Macri. Sorry, I can't really see. Were you for the amendment or against?
I was for the amendment, Chair.
For the amendment, okay. So that's
Councillor
Macri
Hesse
for,
against.
And Hesse against. So councillors, that is that 7-7, Catherine?
That's correct, Mayor.
So that's 7 for and 7 against, which means I use my casting vote and I vote against. So that amendment is not accepted. We now move
to a further amendment.
Yes, I can see that, Councillor Byrne. So we've got the second amendment, which is Councillor Burns. If you'd like to speak to that, Councillor Byrne, that's fine.
Yeah, thanks very much. Councillors, I'm proposing that we replace point 3 with the following wording: seek clarification from the government about whether a cafe can operate within Callan Park under existing legislation and whether the St Jerome's Laneway Festival constitutes a commercial use. The reason I am moving that is that the Laneway Festival previously was able to operate out of Callan Park under the auspice of Sydney College of the Arts. Since Sydney College of the Arts has left Callan Park, it's proved impossible for the Laneway Festival to take place there. Personally, I would be happy to support an exemption to allow the Laneway Festival to take place at Callan Park, regardless of whether it's auspiced by an educational institution or not. And I think this is the sort of intricacy that we need to make sure councillors are fully informed about prior to adopting complex policy positions. We need clarification about whether the Laneway Festival constitutes a commercial activity. Furthermore, notwithstanding the truth about the statements that have been made that a not-for-profit cafe can operate within Callan Park, the fact is that there is no cafe operating within Callan Park now. A lot of people raise with me the fact that they would like to be able to get a coffee and a sandwich when they're going for a walk through Callan Park and are not able to. I don't consider it a matter of principle that a cafe that turned a profit shouldn't be located in Callan Park, and I would like to get more information about how we could facilitate a cafe opening within Callan Park within the existing limits of the Callan Park Act. So I'll move that way.
Thank you for that, Councillor Byrne. So we need a seconder for Councillor Byrne's motion. We've got a seconder for that, Councillor McKenna. Councillor McKenna, did you want to speak to the amendment?
Just briefly, coffees in parks have become the norm somewhat in recent times, and it is now a constant request that people want to be able to have a coffee when they go to the park. There is hardly a park left in Sydney of any substantial park that does not have a coffee shop or a coffee outlet where you can get a coffee and sometimes something to eat. So I think we should seek that clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. Any other councillor would like to speak on this item?
Yes, Mayor, this is Councillor Steer. I would like to speak.
Yeah.
Neither of these ideas by Councillor Byrne are bad ideas. In fact, they're quite good ideas. A cafe is always handy, although there are plenty of cafes in Darling Street, very close to Callan Park, so it's not really so urgent. And a festival is always good fun, and I'm the first person to support a festival. However, I think this is making policy on the run and is distracting from the real issue of the Mayoral Minute, which is about the privatisation of Callan Park and opposing the privatisation of Callan Park and opposing the changes to the management and administration of Callan Park. I think at the moment, worrying about a cafe when we've got a pandemic and worrying about a festival when we've got a pandemic are premature. Perhaps in the next term of council that could be revisited, but I don't think we need to decide that today. And as councillors Passis and Macri have said, we don't have enough information about these things. They felt they didn't have enough information about the legislative proposal. Well, I don't think we've got enough information about whether we should approve a cafe, or is there anybody who wants to run a cafe, whether the St Jerome's Laneway Festival people want to run it in Callan Park, or what their plans are, or even whether it is possible given the current restrictions and when they'll be lifted, who knows. So it's simply not appropriate for this amendment to be dealt with within this minute. And it can easily be revisited at a later date when perhaps the situation with Callan Park has become clarified by all the things that we're proposing on doing, and there will be less question marks over the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Look, I might speak briefly before I go to any other councillor that would like to speak. Look, I see this as a wolf in sheep's clothing, because what Councillor Byrne is actually proposing is to remove point 3. Note that point 3 says opposes any commercial uses at Callan Park. That's effectively saying opposes the privatisation of Callan Park. Effectively, by removing that, Councillor Byrne is signalling that the privatisation of Callan Park is okay by him, that he's okay for the commercialisation of Callan Park. And don't be fooled by the spin that is put out by the Minister's office about a coffee cart. That's really not what this is about. This is about enabling large properties like the Kirkbride, for example, which is a very, very large property, to essentially be privatised. And we're talking about the sort of things that could end up there would be, for example, a very large private school. Do we really want a very large private school there? Do we really want a business park there? Do we really want a very large function centre there? Because that's the sort of things that you're going to get. The coffee cart, you can get the coffee cart anyway. That's something that is, yes, it might be a not-for-profit. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with not-for-profit. In our part of the world, not-for-profit is celebrated. Perhaps in other parts of Sydney, they want everything to be commercial. But I think not-for-profit's just fine here. And we can have our coffee carts as long as they're not-for-profit in their association. So I think it's very, very dangerous to support Councillor Byrne's motion, because effectively he's saying privatisation is totally okay by us. Okay, other councillors who would like to...
Sorry, Chair, just a point of clarification, because I think there might be some confusion. The wording is on the screen. Both you and Councillor Steer have spoken to wording that is completely different to what is been tabled as an amendment. The amendment seeks clarification from the government about the definitions of commercial use.
Sorry, Councillor Byrne, you don't have a right to speak again. Thank you, Councillor Byrne. You don't have a right to speak again. As you've chosen to do it, I will correct you.
I thought you might have been confused.
No, you're replacing point 3 with. That's what I'm referring to. You're replacing point 3. Okay. Other councillors who want to speak to this item? Councillor De Cruz.
Yeah, I think I'm making the same point as I made with the placement of point 2, that we actually need a starting point of the current Act and then negotiate from there. To cherry pick and randomly identify examples of what we believe may or may not fit commercial use, I think is inappropriate at this time. If there are activities that need to be there, we need to look at specifically how they can operate. For example, the not-for-profit who might be running a cafe would be the canteen operation for the local sports club, and I think that they would welcome extra revenue and interest in their canteen. So I think that there are lots of opportunities to have activities under the current Act before we change. We need to look at changing it to non-commercial use, and whether these activities fit in under commercial use or not can also be considered after, but it's a later down the track when we're looking at amendments to the Act, not to change the Act. So I think we need a strong position, as you have set out in the Mayoral Minute, and we need to stick to that as a starting point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stamalos. Councillor Stamalos.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, it may be reasonable for you to open up that issue in the Mayoral Minute about not-for-profit cafe who can have a coffee in Callan Park, and possibly there might be an amendment there's that consideration of cafes not for profit be made in the future use of Callan Park. But I do see the amendment itself opens up a bit of a wedge, which potentially opens up the discussion of commercialisation and privatisation at too early a stage, and in particular for most of us, it's something we don't want to put on the table because the Act simply...
Thanks, Councillor Stamoulos. It was quite hard to hear you. You were breaking up a bit. Are there any other councillors that want to speak on this item? Councillors, I have added an additional point to the Mayoral Minute, which is that a councillor briefing be organised for councillors as soon as possible, which will enable councillors to identify any issues that they want further information of. And we may also decide that we want to pursue some legal advice as well, we can do as well. Councillors, is there any other person that wants to, any other councillor that wants to speak on this item? Otherwise,
yes,
I'll go to Councillor Byrne for his right of reply. Oh, sorry, was this sorry, Councillor Macri?
Go ahead. Yeah. Chair, I just want to clarify what's being said as far as my position on it. My position is not to weaken the position on the actual hold. My position was to talk about, before we start doing core flutes and all that, to engage with the government first before you press that button. That's where my position is. My position is not to actually change the position per se. That's all. So I just think if we talk before, it's a bit hard to talk after you shoot. That's all. You can say this is the position and that's it. Have the discussion and then say that's it. This is our position. Hold that position. That's fine. But don't shoot and then say we want to talk. That's not an act of someone who wants to really discuss or talk about their position. That's all I want to put forward, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Macri. Councillor, is there any other councillor who wants to speak?
Madam Mayor?
Sorry, who's that?
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Did you hear anything that I said at all, or you were completely...
You're breaking up a lot, so I don't think we did hear everything, no.
Madam Mayor, I wonder if there's an opportunity of opening up the discussion in your Mayoral Minute in regard to not-for-profit cafes.
Yeah, it is covered in the background information in the Mayoral Minute, Councillor Stamoulos. And I'm suggesting that we have a councillor briefing as well.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
And we can, if a councillor briefing, we can tease out issues that councillors want to get more information on, and we can get that information organised for councillors there.
May I suggest we defer this Mayoral Minute till we get the briefing?
No.
Okay, fair enough. No, we haven't got that many months left for the
councillors.
election.
Any other councillor wants to speak on this item? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Byrne for a right of reply on his amendment.
Thanks very much, Chair. I note that a 14-point motion on such a complex policy issue does raise problems, and as councillors have raised previously, Mayoral Minutes are not meant to be tabled on complex policy matters that require consideration. We've received no report on this, a very brief memo last Friday from council officers, but I would hazard a guess that the vast majority of councillors have not read the legislation that we are now adopting a resolution to oppose, let alone the Callan Park Act. So I think that some of the problems that are arising now are due to the fact that the motion has been tabled in that way. I won't bother seeking advice about whether that is in adherence with the Code of Meeting Practice at this point. The amendment is simply to seek clarification about definitions of commercial use from the government. So it's ironic that in the immediately after saying that it's a good idea for councillors to get fully briefed and that we should hold a briefing session urgently, that people are then saying in the next breath that we should oppose an amendment seeking clarification about what is an obvious issue that's raised by the government's draft legislation. I don't think there's any problem at all with seeking clarification about that. There's no position in this. We're not proposing that the government should allow any of those uses. As I've said, I personally have no issue with a cafe or with the Laneway Festival, regardless of whether they're auspiced by a not-for-profit organisation. But that's not what this amendment is seeking to do, simply seeking information, clarification from the government. I think it's pretty blatantly political to oppose that, and hypocritical to say that we're seeking unity and consensus on such a complicated motion that's been tabled with no notice, with no report, but then also to personally criticise me and other councillors who might support an amendment seeking clarification about a legal issue. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Byrne, I'd be happy to incorporate this. I don't have actually an issue with your what you're proposing to do. I have an issue with you replacing point 3 and removing point 3.
I understand that, Mayor.
I'm happy to incorporate it as another point in the Mayoral Minute.
No, but not I understand that, Mayor. The issue is that
because that's actually the issue I'm speaking about.
I understand perfectly your position.
Point of order. Point of order. Are you
please go ahead,
exercising your point of order, Mayor? Are you exercising your right of reply at this point, or what are you doing?
No, I was talking about incorporating Councillor Byrne's amendment into my mayoral minute.
Point of order, Mayor. I don't believe workshopping things is actually part of our code of meeting practice.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Drew. Appreciate that. Okay, so Councillor Byrne doesn't
Councillor
want to
Porteous,
amend
can I just seek some clarification, please? I didn't get a copy of this.
Councillor McKenna, look, I'm really sorry, but
the Mayoral Minute. And we haven't been able to see it on the screen. So could the screen just go down so we can see the Mayoral Minute again, please? Yeah. Especially point 3, because there were it was a busy screen, and thank you.
Okay, so councillors, we've got Councillor Byrne's amendment, which is proposing to remove point 3. Point 3 opposes any commercial uses at Callan Park, and to replace it with asking 2 questions of the government about the laneways and cafes. So that's the amendment which is moved by Councillor Byrne. I'll now put that amendment. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's Passis, McKenna, Byrne, Drury, Araciti, York. All those against, please raise your hand. That's Hesse, Porteous, De Cruz, Stamalos, Lockie, Steer, Kiat. Councillor Macri, sorry, I can't see you at all. Councillor Macri, are you there? Okay, I think Councillor Macri, Councillor Macri. Sorry, are you voting for Councillor Byrne's amendment or against? We can't hear you. Can you just say whether you're voting for or against, please?
For.
For the amendment. Okay, so that's Macri for. Okay, so councillors, that vote is therefore, that's again 7 for and 7 against. So I'll use my casting vote and vote against that as well. Okay, so we move to Amendment 3. Councillor Byrne, would you like to address Amendment 3, please?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. In doing so, I'll just note that with both amendments so far having been defeated by a casting vote, that would indicate that we're not getting off on the right foot in terms of consensus on this, and goes to Councillor Passis's point about probably the better process would be for a briefing session.
Okay, just a minute, Taker, could you get the timer on, please? Thank you. Please go ahead, Councillor Byrne.
Thanks very much. Along with a cafe and the return of the Laneway Festival, another issue that many people do raise about Callan Park is the potential to locate a high school or TAFE campus at Kirkbride, at the precinct. The loss of Sydney College of the Arts has been a significant one. Lots of people are very concerned that we're going to see the decline and degradation of the Kirkbride precinct in the same way that other buildings throughout the site have become dilapidated once they are untenanted. I'm not familiar with the applicants for the expression of interest that the government's conducted, but I do support the clause in the Mayoral Minute to seek disclosure of that, and I, in principle, very much support the idea of not-for-profit and health organisations that were alluded to earlier coming together in a consortium. It's a huge site, as Mr. Greenland referenced. It may be that there's the potential for an institutional educational use, such as a campus of a TAFE or a school, as well as the consortium who have apparently made a submission. I think it's a bit frustrating that in 10 years since the member for Balmain was elected, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of criticism of very old proposals for Callan Park, but very little action on making progress for bringing in new tenants to Callan Park. In fact, the loss of Sydney College of the Arts was a clear indication that in that premises we're going backwards. I think it's there's enough demand for a high school or TAFE campus that it needs to be looked at. It's not something you can dive into without undertaking proper research. We do know that Leichhardt and Balmain campuses are full to the brim, which is great. It's really encouraging to see. When I was a student at Balmain High, it was going to close when I was doing my HSC because there were so few people attending, notwithstanding Councillor Porteous's alluding earlier to me not having been very involved in the issue. I've actually been walking in Callan Park since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I think we do need to think about how Sydney Secondary College will succeed if the population continues to grow, and Callan Park is an obvious location where that could take place, pending the proper feasibility study. So I'm proposing that we write to the state member for Balmain and to the government, seeking that they undertake that feasibility study.
Thanks for that, Councillor Byrne.
May I second this, but just suggest we need the establishment of a public high school or TAFE camp.
Thanks for that, Councillor Drury. I was a bit worried about that as well. So can we just add the words, are you happy with that, Councillor Byrne?
I am.
You can add the words public high school or public TAFE and public university, just to be sure there's no misinterpretation there. Look, at the moment, the Callan Park Act doesn't allow secondary school on the site, is my understanding. Might just go to our legal officer, I believe, who's here this evening, just to get that clarified. Could I ask that our General Counsel address that issue about what the current permissions are?
May I say, this is not a Mayoral Minute. This is not debate.
And whether this would be permitted.
May I speak? This is
no,
like,
Councillor Pass.
this is like a briefing. Why don't we have a briefing?
Councillor Passes, thank you. No. So we're just going to the General Counsel for that, please. Robert.
Through you, Mayor, the Callan Park, can you hear me?
Yes.
The Callan Park Act at the moment provides that development for health facilities and educational or community facilities may be carried out at Callan Park. An educational facility is defined to be a university or any other facility providing educational services on a not-for-profit basis, but does not include a secondary school or a primary school.
Okay. All right. So that wouldn't be permitted under the Callan Park Act, but a university would be permitted. Okay.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Or some educational facility on a not-for-profit basis, but not a primary or secondary school.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. Okay. Is there any other council that would like to speak to this item?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor McKenna, I've got, and then Councillor Stamos. No. Okay. Councillor Stamos.
Madam Mayor, yes, I think that part of this amendment is inconsistent with the Act as it currently stands. And just a question through you to the relevant officer, or possibly yourself, Madam Mayor. I thought you said that a decision on the Kirkbride buildings was imminent.
That's correct. Actually, I was told today that the successful tender has been chosen. There was only one tenderer and they have been successful. And we're just waiting for the Minister for Health to sign off. That's what I was told.
Well, then, Madam Mayor, I can't see the point of this amendment then in light of that.
Not really, no. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any other councillor that wants to speak on this item? Okay. No other councillor that wants to speak on this item?
Yes, Mayor. Councillor Steer.
Please go ahead, councillor Steer.
I agree with Councillor Stamoulis on this point. I can't see the point of this amendment. We've already established that part of it is not lawful with the current Act, and that the Kirkbride, and you've just told us that Kirkbride, there's only been one person interested in tendering for it, and that's been done. So I don't think this amendment in its present form should be agreed, possibly if the words relating to public high school are deleted, because we already know the answer to that one, and leaving in the reference to public university or public TAFE, we could agree with it. But again, with all due respect, Councillor Byrne, in his capacity as Mayor of Leichhardt and lately of Inner West Council, has had many, many years to bring these amendments to us, give us briefings and make sure that we're all across it. And suddenly these are being put as amendments to your Mayoral Minute, which is dealing with an immediate threat to the administration of Callan Park. So once again, where is the urgency for this amendment? And I think it really needs to be thought out a little better than it is before the councillors should be asked to consider it. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Councillor Steer. Is there any other councillor that would like to speak to this item? Councillor Drury, have you got your hand up? Or?
I do, Mayor, and thank you for giving me the opportunity as the seconder of this to speak to it.
Pleasure.
I think what we know is matters in relation to Callan Park are a little up in the air at the moment. That there is a state government wishing to put forward a number of new or recycled ideas in relation to the park. And I think it's well within the rights of the Inner West Council, whilst matters are in a state of flux, to actually put in another suggestion, particularly in support of public education. I think those people who have dealings with our local high schools, our local public high schools, realise exactly how full they are and how cramped their facilities are. We have a public facility not too far away from campuses of the Sydney College, which arguably could be used. And that's what's being suggested here. It's saying, why doesn't the state government have a look at the feasibility of this? Have a look at it. Have a think about it. Put it in the mix. You know, wouldn't it be great to get public education back into that precinct. Wouldn't be a great thing. Now, I understand the current Act may not permit a high school, and we've been told so by our legal counsel, and thank him for that. But just because it's not in the current Act doesn't mean it's not a good idea. There are many great ideas for Callan Park and the areas that aren't currently in the Act. I think what we need to do is take an opportunity as the Inner West Council to put forward a proposition that what should be considered is the use of Kirkbride for public education. I think that would be a great use for it. Obviously, the feasibility needs to be looked at, and we are not in the job of providing education. The state government is in that job. Therefore, why don't we ask them to have a look at the question? I'd urge everyone who actually has any real and deep commitment to public education to vote for this amendment.
Thanks for that, Councillor Drury. Councillors, I might say a couple of things about Councillor Byrne's amendment. Look, at first, obviously, I think, we want to be looking at opportunities for other sites for schools, and we all acknowledge the fact that we've got schools which are bursting at the seams. But the reality is that this is actually really quite cruel in a way, because there's no way that Kirkbride is going to be a site for a high school or a university campus at that point in time, unless we decide to trash the tender that's been put forward very, very, very carefully by a very well-known local not-for-profit organisation doing great work with some of the most vulnerable people in our community. Now, they are about to get the successful tender for Kirkbride. By putting this forward, we're actually going to put in jeopardy them getting that tender. I think that's pretty bad, actually. It's pretty awful. And look, I know it makes a good social media post to go out there and say, oh, the council doesn't want, to have a school in Callan Park. The reality is that that is not, and never was, never could be a site for a school. This is not the right place for it, and it really is a bit of a beat up, to be honest. And I guess it's just another way of trying to trash the Callan Park Act, which seems to be the whole purpose of the 3 amendments that Councillor Byrne has put up. Really disappointing, actually. I thought that Councillor Byrne was genuine in his support for Callan Park. I really did.
Point of order, Chair.
It's really sad.
Point of order, Chair.
The intention is clearly.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes, please go ahead, Councillor Byrne.
I've been pretty restrained. There's been a lot of personal reflections made about me by various speakers, including yourself. I'll ask you to desist.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Happily will do so. So yeah, look, I think it's unfortunate that this is presented in this way, because really this is not helpful to anybody. I would much prefer that Councillor Byrne brought forward a motion, a notice of motion, and actually address the issue in a way which is not going to trash the work that others are doing, and particularly another not-for-profit that really deserves our support. So again, very disappointed with this, and let's move forward in a positive way and find another solution there. Thank you. Are there any councillors that want to speak on this issue?
Yes,
otherwise I'll go ahead, please, Councillor Passis.
Yes, I would like to take up on a few points you made. If that's not a site for a high school, where would a high school be? On a highway, or the busy Parramatta Road or Liverpool Road? If that's not a place, that is a very, very large site. That site can cater for many different type of organisations. Very large site. And this is too important. The site's too large for us to be playing around with a mayoral minute a couple of weeks before an election. There's no sincerity in in this mayoral minute, I'm afraid. This mayoral minute is quickly to put up because of the election. There's plenty of ways. You put call flutes up, you had meetings, you spent money on WestConnex. It is all politicking because a few people have made suggestions tonight, whether you say they marry in with your mayoral minute or not, they are suggestions that all need to be looked at for such a large site. One of the largest sites I think that we have in the inner west. We have parks for our residents that are half the parks are taken over by sport and football. This area can cater for 10 different type of organisations. And that we must look at what organisations are desperately in need of this type of site. It's not good enough just to jump up and down and say, you are not to touch it. You even just said yourself, we're bursting at the seams. And another councillor said the population has grown 7%. Well, it's going to grow more. So you can't say you're locking it up and nothing's allowed on there. We have to look at space, which we haven't got, and what is needed desperately, whether it's for schools, for medical, for elderly, whatever. And this mayoral minute tonight is just pure politicking, because if there was sincerity in it, we would call the minister out, we would sit down, we would talk to him, we would show what our needs are, and then he would tell us maybe he will take on board what we propose.
Thanks, Councillor Passes. Councillor, if there's no other councillor that wants to speak on this item, I'll go to Councillor Byrne for right of reply. Oh, sorry, Councillor Macri, please go ahead.
Chair, if I've listened to the debate and I'm trying to absorb as much information as I can to sort of help me sort of make an informed decision, but it seems to me there's a lot of questions that are being asked and they're not being answered. The fact that you seem to be alluding that you have information, you know who the actual successful tenderer is for the site. And that if we all knew that, that might give us some more comfort in voting that. It just seems we're not getting the information we need to make decisions. That's where the whole idea of getting a briefing and, you know, we talk about the ability for cafes and all those things, and council, the crew's brought up, it's a good opportunity for the sporting clubs to actually run canteens and make money, but they're all seasonal things. So they run these things when their seasons are on. But what happens with the people that want a coffee and things like that? All those things, you know, I'd rather be comfortable with all those things that are sort of nutted out and all the information is there in making those decisions. That's all. That's why I'm voting the way I'm voting. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Macri. Councillor Byrne, did you want to write a reply?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. I'll just say that some of the descriptions of the pretty modest and sensible amendments that have been tabled as being cruel and awful and so on are hyperbolic. I understand that it's a long-standing practice amongst some groups on the council to get stuck into me personally when there's a disagreement over policy, but it's been a bit OTT, frankly. The fact that there's been an EOI process for the Kirkbride precinct that's definitely true. Everything else that has been asserted in regards to that EOI process, I don't believe any of us are in possession of any information about. The member for Balmain has said that the successful tenderer for the EOI is going to be a business park or a function centre, including naming a former state politician as the person who was facilitating that. I don't have any information at all about what the outcome of that EOI process is, and it's not secret squirrel business. If there's information about that, it should be transparently disclosed to all councillors. Councillor Drury was absolutely correct that just because the Callan Park Act doesn't currently allow for a high school or a TAFE campus does not mean that that's an unsuitable use for the site. And this really goes to the point that I made at the start, that stating that there can never be any change to the Callan Park Act. Well, so far tonight, we've seen that what that seems to mean is that because we've got such a black and white view about that, or the council's about to adopt such a black and white view about that, we can't look into whether the Laneway Festival can be located there. We can't look into a cafe. Now we can't look into a public high school of all things. It's not the Bible. It's just a piece of legislation that can be improved upon through close analysis and public engagement and negotiation. So I think it's particularly disappointing to see, if that's what occurs here, the council rule out of hand consideration of a high school at the site. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Councillor Byrne. I'll put Councillor Byrne's amendments. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And I've got Byrne, Passes, Drury, McKenna, Restici, York, and I assume Macri. Councillor Macri, you voting for that? Yes, Macri. Against, we've got Porteous, De Cruz, Stamoulis, Hesse, Steer, Lockie, Kiet. Yeah. So that's 7 for and 7 against. And I use my casting vote to vote against. So councillors, we now go back to the substantive motion. We've already had an opportunity to speak to the Mayoral Minute. Was there any other councillor that wanted to speak to the Mayoral Minute before I go to my right of reply? So I don't see any hands up at this stage. Obviously, if you've already spoken to it, you won't be able to speak to it again. Councillor McKenna, did you have your hand up? No, okay. Okay, councillors, I'll go to my right of reply with the Mayoral Minute in that case. So councillors, in terms of the, first of all, just addressing Councillor Macri's questioning about the EOI process. Look, I think it is reasonably public knowledge because I was told this today by the senior policy officer in the Minister's office. There was only one tenderer for the EOI for Kirkbride, and that one tenderer is We Help Ourselves, a consortium with We Help Ourselves. We Help Ourselves, for councillors that don't know the organisation, is a drug and alcohol rehabilitation organisation which does fantastic work in rehabilitation. Is already located in Callan Park in the NGO sector and would be expanding through into Kirkbride as part of a consortium. They are apparently the successful tenders for the Kirkbride site, which is why I'm really concerned about the amendment that Councillor Byrne put forward, because obviously it would jeopardise their right to, they've gone through the whole tender process. Obviously the tendering also includes the maintenance and required restoration of the building, and they are ready to move in. So why would we go and jeopardise that with a motion of council, which really doesn't go anywhere at all? So I would like us to see moving forward.
Sorry, Mayor, can I ask you a question? How would it jeopardise?
No, Councillor Passes,
how would it jeopardise?
Councillor Passes.
No, I'm asking a question.
No, Councillor Passes, you can't ask a question. I've got my right of reply, sorry.
I said that it would
thank you, Councillor Passes, please desist. In terms of the laneway, the issue that Councillor Byrne raised again, laneway has moved off Callan Park site. It's got too big for Callan Park. It couldn't go back to Callan Park anyway. It was a great festival and it was supported for years by Leichhardt Council, by Friends of Callan Park, and obviously was run through the college School of the Arts but now it has become too big, which is the only reason that it's not at Callan Park now. I think it's really important when you're advocating for your local community, you're advocating for a park as precious as Callan Park, which is always going to be lusted after by many different commercial operations which would like to get on the site and utilise it, that you need to stand strong, that you always have to start from a position of strength, hence the Mayoral Minute that I've put forward. I think it's important that we say 50 leases are not acceptable, that privatisation of Callan Park is not acceptable, that we want council retained as the consent authority, and we want to see the establishment of the trust. These are not outlandish things to say. I think it's also important that we stand with the community in saying that we oppose the changes that are in the Callan Park Special Provisions Act. Again, this is something that protects our park, and we need to be sure that we're doing everything in our power to protect. I believe that we can stand together, united as a council on this issue, and I would ask councillors to support the Mayoral Minute. Let's have this councillor briefing, which is there at point 16. I will be approaching the minister. Thank you.
I'll move to extend your time for a minute.
Thank you, Councillor Steer. Is there a seconder for that?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favour? Sorry. All those against? Oh, thank you. I'll wind up my time then. Just to say, Callan Park is a very special place. It deserves your support, and I would hope that you would vote for the Mayoral Minute. Councillors, I'm now going to put the Mayoral Minute. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And we have Steer, Porteous, Hesse, Byrne, De Cruz, Macri, Stamalos, Lockie, Kiat, York, McKenna, I believe. Yeah. And against, we have Passos and Councillor Rossetti, are you against? Sorry?
I'm for.
You're for. Okay, Councillor Rossetti is for. So that's 13 for and 1 against and 1 absent. Thank you, councillors, for supporting the Mayoral Minute. Okay, councillors, we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the item that was item 10 and has now become item 3, I believe, which is Councillor Passis's motion, which is where we left.
Mayor.
Item 1.
Mayor, may I once again seek to move that this matter be held in camera. This matter directly goes to questions about the general manager and the senior staff, as well as the mayor. And I do not believe it is appropriate for us to be discussing what is alleged to be the behaviour of the general manager and the senior staff in open council. I think the Act is very clear on this. I believe, and I move that we suspend standing orders to go into closed camera to deal with this matter.
Thank you for that, Councillor Drury. Do I have a seconder for Councillor Drury's motion?
I'll second that. Councillor Hesse.
Councillor Hesse is seconding that. Okay, so councillors, we have a mover and a seconder that we go into confidential session.
As a mover of the motion, I would like legal advice from our legal person on this.
Councillor Passos, you can move to go into confidential session. I
oppose going into confidential session. Our residents, this has been on the agenda. This council goes into confidential session more than any other council in New South Wales, probably Australia. I think the residents.
Okay, Councillor Passos, I'll get legal advice for you. Okay, so if we could just go to the general council. Actually, no, it would be the governance we have a governance expert here tonight. Could you respond to that, John Doyle?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The motion to go into a confidential session is a legal motion and is able to go into confidential session under section 10A 2A of the Local Government Act. It's up to the council to determine whether it wishes to go into confidential session.
Thank you for that. So Councillor Passos, that's been clarified that that is legal. Councillors,
I would like some more legal advice. Does the General Manager and the Mayor have a conflict?
No, Councillor Passos, that is not appropriate. That would be part of the motion. That's something that you can deal with.
No, I'm asking for legal advice.
Well, I don't think we could deal with this now. We're going to deal with this.
Point of order.
We're not actually dealing with the motion because we've got a motion to deal with it in a confidential session. So we deal with that first, and then if that successful, we go into confidential session. If it's not, we don't go into confidential session.
In the interest of an open and transparent council, I oppose going into a confidential session.
Councillor Lockie.
I was just going to say, I don't believe that staff can provide advice to councillors on whether or not they have a conflict of interest. I think it's up to councillors to determine that for themselves.
Yeah, that's right. I agree with you, Councillor Lockie. Did you, Councillor Cruz, you've got your hand up. Did you have a point of order?
Look, I think we've had previous legal advice that we actually have to give a legal reason of why we're going into confidential session. And
so is this a point of order, Councillor De Cruz? Is this a point of order?
Well, I'm actually, yes, I guess it's a point of order or a clarification. It may not be the governance team, but it may be the legal department. We've had legal advice before. There's a clause under which we go into confidential session.
Okay, that was just provided to you by the governance specialist. It's under section 10, Councillor De Cruz. Councillors, can we now go to the vote in terms of going into confidential session?
Mayor, if I can, on one of these rare occasions, I believe that Councillor De Cruz is correct. I think we should suspend standing orders, enter into confidential session to deal with item 1 as it deals with staffing matters.
Yeah, which I thought you outlined previously quite well anyway.
Thank you. It just doesn't, because I didn't write it, it's not there.
Yeah. And just to note as well, it was also my decision that we would need to go into confidential session. I had spoken previously with councillors to assert whether or not we could avoid those issues, but I don't think we can. And I think it's prudent that we go into confidential session. So councillors, if there's no more discussion on this, I'm going to put the motion that we go into confidential session. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So we've got, okay, we've got McKenna, Drury, Porteous, Steers, Hesse, Byrne, De Cruz. Councillor Macri, are you for favour or not? Yes or no? No. Okay, Lockie, Rossetti, Kiat, and York.
No, I'm against.
You're against. Okay, all those against. So we've got Rossetti, Passos, Stamalos, Macri. It's 10 for and 4 against. So we'll now move into confidential session. Catherine, I think we need a couple of minutes, don't we, to just take the audio off temporarily.
Yes, please. I'll let you know when it's ready.
Okay.